So, what does one read when they haven't read in a year? And prior to that very small book they read last year, they haven't read a full book and completed it in 13 years. Probably should start with something small, something simple, maybe something cute, and by a pretty easy author, right? I think perhaps not. I finished in 3 months' time, starting from April 22nd to July 11th, It by Stephen King. And I like this little bookmark that I had to go along with it. It was really cool, really fun. Most of the time I kind of put it down because obviously it's a little spooky. It's from the chapter 2 film. But I read this big book in 3 months. I started it when I was substituting, and I had this crazy hope to get it done by time school ended in May, but took a little longer in July when I finished it. But it's really sparked an interest in me and a recognition in me that yes, I love film, but books are actually my origin of love. I'll go into another video where I do booktubers, a newbie booktubers tag, and I'll answer all the questions about when I started reading, how many books have I read, all that stuff. And any questions about that, I'll answer there. But let's just say, I used to read in school so much, I got detention because I wouldn't pay attention. And I loved it because I'd just go and read more. I was in book clubs, and I got accused of not reading more adult books, not adult items, just bigger books for harder readers to read when I was like in a little kid's grade at the time. So, and a lot of movies come from books, are based from books. And let me just say, whether I read a book first before the film comes out, like Harry Potter, or I've seen the movies a million times and then read the book, I always love the book more because you get so much more detail with the book. And that's exactly how I feel about this one. This is definitely a 5-star for me. If I could give it a 6-star, I would. These characters, and I don't mean just from the films and adaptations, but from this book, this story, and how they actually connect more with each other, and how we get perspective from the entity of it, and how we actually don't get that much Pennywise in the book, because the entity takes over and just becomes whatever you fear the most. And we get a lot more than just Pennywise in this, and I absolutely love it. And even a film reviewer, Cody Leach, said, oh, well, Pennywise is so easy to beat. I would be able to beat Pennywise. You just bully him. According to the films, you just bully him. You call him a few names. He gets kind of scared and shrivels up. No, in the book, it's so much more than that. It's like a whole different universe, basically, that Bill Denbrough has to go into to face the entity and crush its heart. And to us, it looks like he's just standing there in the deadlights. But there's a whole universe going on, and I just loved it. Some differences in the book I want to discuss that happened in the book more than in the movies and the adaptations are, first off, there is a connection to The Shining, which last thing I expected to read, which is of Dick Hallorann. He shows up in this, and Dick Hallorann is the mess cook from The Shining, and he is in the Black Spot fires with Mike's dad to help them get out of the situation. And I think, this is just a theory I have, that he must have used the shine in order to help them out. That's just a theory. I don't know. It's a book theory. I know there's like a film theory. It's just a theory of film theory. It's a book theory for me. It's a connection. And I'm actually going to go down a whole Stephen King list. I have the Dark Tower because I heard that's where all the multiverse kind of spreads out from, and this is one of the biggest connections with the Ritual of Chud. And the Ritual of Chud is mentioned in one of the adaptations, but not the turtle. And the turtle was my favorite. He's so cute. Basically, he vomited up our universe, so we're turtle vomit, but he ends up passing away when they get older because the entity of it comes back every 27 to 28 years later. 28 years later. I still need to do that film review. Could you imagine a cross between 28 years later and it? Okay, I'm going off topic. But basically, let's see, he comes back and unfortunately the little turtle passes away. He's trying to throw up another universe and he gets choked and he passes. It sounds really bizarre, but I get it. I definitely understand. This book is written obviously by Stephen King. It's his 22nd book and his 17th under his own name, written in 1986. It takes places between 1957 and 1958 when the Losers Club are just kids, and then 27 years later, 1984 to 1985, when they become an adult and get called back to Derry, Maine to face it. Two characters that I want to talk about that weren't really mentioned all too much in the movies is Tom Rogan and Kay. I don't think Kay was mentioned at all in any of the adaptations, but Tom Rogan is Beverly Marsh's husband, who really resembles her dad. And she kind of explains, because a lot of people are like, why would you go and be with someone who reminds you just like the person who hurt you? She kind of explains that, you know, Tom Rogan worries about her. He worries a lot. Her dad worried about her. He worried a lot. And in her mind, I don't agree with this, but in her mind, at least they cared about her, which is just the way she feels. But when she gets called back to come back to Derry from Mike, because after they leave Derry, Maine as kids, Mike stays, so he remembers a lot and he remembers to call them. And she leaves Tom. She kind of has her comeuppance and, you know, is able to leave him. Well, that's where he's left in adaptations. But in the book, he's mad. So he goes to her best friend Kay and kind of assaults her to telling him that she went to Derry, Maine. And then also, and they did mention this in the adaptations, Bill Denborough's wife also follows him to Derry. And I mention that because they do actually have a meetup with the entity of it. It doesn't go into detail of what happened to them, but Audra does get saved. She becomes comatose, and then Tom, they kind of just leave there. They're both in the spider's webbing, which it is not a spider, but I think that's just the closest our brains can compute to him being, or it being. And so, yeah, they're in the webbing and they get Audra out, and she's comatose until Bill rides away with her on Silver. And Tom Rogan, they kind of just leave in there. Another character I'm going to talk about that they did mention in the adaptations but did not go into detail, and I think this character is so much scarier than it, Pennywise, any of that. Patrick Hockstetter. Who he is and what happens to him, so horrible and so much worse than really anything I think in the book. Patrick basically believes that he is the only real person on the planet. And that makes him not care when he hurts his baby brother at 8 months old. And I mean more than hurts, if you get my drift. Hurts animals, hurts innocent things, ends their timelines. Sometimes in gruesome, slow ways. And that was very disturbing to read, but I didn't choose to read this book just to skip around in some areas, because there's some booktubers out there that will get to some parts, the part, we're going to get to it, but will be like, oh, you probably want my opinion on that. Just go ahead and skip it, or, you know, just don't focus on that. we're going to talk about it, just like how we're going to talk about Patrick Hockstetter and his death. The way he goes is, he basically has this refrigerator where he keeps the corpses of those he tortures and ends their timeline. That could have been bad. I'm going to put this down real quick. And there's leeches, flying leeches, and they attack him, and one ends up in his mouth. And it bursts, and it goes into detail of how that is when it burst in his mouth. And that's the point. I did throw the book down that night and had to make sure I did not vomit up my dinner that night. And it just was, his whole storyline is just horrific. We're also now going to talk about Beverly Marsh and her situation with her dad. That also leads to the situation of that scene. And the reason I want to talk about it is because, again, a lot of booktubers will be like, oh, you want my opinion on it? Just go ahead and skip it. I'm not going to skip it because, yes, it's very disturbing. I think the most disturbing thing is that an adult man the age of Stephen King wrote about this mostly from a little girl's point of view, and that part's disturbing. But if you take out the reality of this world and just focus on the story, the most disturbing thing to me is that she says, my dad would say this is the answer, because they get out of the sewers after defeating it for the first time as kids. And, well, in her mind, it is going after them because they're kids. So what's the best way to defeat it and make sure this doesn't happen again? Is to grow up. And it's such, to me, it's sad that the dad and also just society really, and some parents do teach that, don't teach, it just really is a stigma that once you have sexual orientations and everything, intimacy, that's when you're an adult. And that's so far from the truth. Even in school growing up where I grew up, also I think too is that there wasn't an adult with the child during this, so that makes it a little bit more palatable. They're all kids. It's still very disturbing, but there were kids in my school, at my young grade schools, becoming pregnant and getting together with each other because everyone's like, oh, have you kissed him yet? Oh, what's your status with him? Have you guys gone to this space? Are you official? Oh my goodness. All these whispers and kind of peer pressure. And so then you fall into the peer pressure and you walk outside one day when you are, yes, underage and you are young, and you walk outside because everyone's like, oh, when are you going to do it? When are you going to do it? And you're like, ta-da! Just to find out no one cares. And you feel stupid. But thankfully they get to forget. So they may have felt stupid afterward, but they don't remember because they all leave Derry. But to me, that's just, it's actually explainable, but it's sad. It's a sad explanation that she felt that's what makes them an adult, because it's not. Teach your kids. It is not what makes you an adult at all. A woman being intact, a woman having her first cycle, that doesn't make you an adult. That just makes you a human with those organs that we all with those organs end up going through. And it's still disturbing, but it makes sense in her mind why she felt the need to do that. And it also explains why, again, she goes to Tom Rogan and begins to feel that same sense of comfort in her mind because it reminds her of her dad. Another person who kind of ends up in the same relationship is Eddie Casbrick. His mom is very much a overprotective mom, a worrier. She kind of made him believe he was sick. And I do like how the pharmacist is like, it's just a placebo, your inhaler, it's just water, it's a placebo. And in the film, in 2017, he throws the inhaler at his mom and he's like, it's just a gazebo, because that's so innocent. Again, that's that innocent child mind. He doesn't know what placebo is, but he knew the word gazebo. So that's just the thing that came to his mind. And that was really good. But he ends up being with a woman who reminds him of his mom. When he gets the call to come back to Derry, she's like, oh, Eddie, don't go. Can I come with you, Eddie? Oh, what are we gonna do, Eddie? It's like, I was so proud of him because he's just like, yeah, bye. And even as a kid, when he's in the movie throwing the inhaler, saying it's just a gazebo. In the book, there's a scene where he got his arm broken by Henry Bowers, the big bully in his gang, and the mom's like, oh, it's your friends. Your friends are the reason your arm is broken. You're not to see them again. He's like, no, it's not my friends. And he kind of has a premonition of her telling his friends they can't stay and kicking them out. And he's like, my friends are going to be here, and you're not going to tell them no, and you're not going to kick them out. And she was kind of scared of him. We get a version of her side of the story of that. And she says, she walks in, and he's no longer the scared little boy. He has a stern face, and he's like, you are not to send my friends away. And I was like, go you, Eddie. Go you. But then you end up marrying a woman just the same and still using your inhaler. And Eddie passes because he actually stuck the inhaler and his whole arm into the mouth of the entity of it when it's the spider version. And anyone's reflexes would chomp down on that, and it chomps his arm off, and he passes away. And it's really sad when he passes because it's from his point of view, and he wanted to say something. He wanted to say one last thing, but he couldn't remember what he wanted to say. He's like, I know. And then the next line says, and Eddie died. And I'm just like, I was crying. I was bawling. That scene I bawled at. But there's also Ben Hanscom. And Ben, to me, was actually maybe my favorite character because he just was very sweet. And I think he should have been the one to grow up and call them all back and be the librarian, because he did look up the history of this clown and this entity and what's going around, the missings of the town. But that ends up going to Mike Hanlon instead. And Mike's the one who calls them back. But however, the difference with him is in the movies, he ends up facing the entity of it with his friends at the end as adults. In this, he doesn't, because Henry Bowers, that bully, goes after them as adults because, again, the entity of it that comes to him in the form of the moon tells him, do my bidding and go after the losers, because the less there are, the more I'm likely to win. So Henry goes, he attacks Mike, and he lands him in the hospital for the coming back and facing it again. Another member that does not make it to the end with them is Stanley Uris. And Stanley is such an innocent little guy. He's so sweet. He loves to watch birds. And again, kind of a flip-flop thing. Mike was attacked by birds. He saw the entity of it as birds, where Stan was a bird watcher. So I thought that should have gone to Stan, but it is what it is. But Stan, as an adult, he doesn't want to go back when he gets that call. He gets very scared, and he ends up taking his own life. And I love the chapter. It's one of the very first in the book where it actually, again, shows a point of view from someone unexpected, his wife. And in the films, it's like, oh, that's sad. We feel that, but we're more shocked seeing Stan took his life. In the book, you feel his wife, the sadness, the fear, and all these losers in this club not only had those things in common, but none of them, they all became wealthy, and they all weren't able to have kids, or just didn't have kids. And I really felt that with Stan and his wife the most. So he didn't make it back to Derry. Richie Tozer, let's talk about him. I really liked him. I did not like his jokes. I did not like his voices. And kind of like Bill, who we're going to talk about next, whenever they wrote in his jokes or wrote in Bill's stutter, I appreciated Stephen King writing the stutter in the book, but I can't stand that kind of writing. So I just read them normally. I read Richie's parts in his normal voice. I read Bill's stutter normally, being said normally. But Richie had a pretty normal childhood. Nothing too crazy going on there. But he saw the entity of it as Paul Bunyan statue, the big Paul Bunyan statue, attacking him. And in the chapter 2 adaptation, him and Eddie had a more love connection than expected. But I kind of see it in this as well, because they did kind of have quibs with each other every now and then. And I think what Eddie wanted to say was one last thing to Richie, because Richie was holding him when he passed. So that's what I think, but that's just a speculation. And then Bill Dunbra. Bill definitely sees the entity of it as Pennywise the clown, because that's how his brother Georgie saw it before he lost his life at the sewers with his little boat that floated down into the sewers. And we all float here. And Bill sees him as that. Bill has a stutter, and basically he's just, his main thing, his main drive is revenge on the entity of it for taking the life of his brother. It ruined his family. It ruined his mom and dad. They really just became shells of people afterward, which I can't even talk about. That's another thing, is watching the films as a kid. Pennywise, obviously, the scariest part of the films, right? In the whole story, scariest part is the monster, the big bad. An 7 to 8 foot tall man dressed as a clown who has razor sharp teeth. Creepy. In the book, I don't really see the clown Pennywise as much. There are creepy factors, such as when Beverly hears the voices in the sink, and her friends see the blood. They're cleaning the blood, and no adult sees it. That is really terrifying. However, I do think the most terrifying thing is the adults of the town. The fact that they don't care, the fact that they don't help, that is absolutely terrifying. And I think that's kind of Stephen King's main point about a lot of stories, is he can throw all the monsters and creepy crawlies in there, but at the end of it all, it's always the humans that are the big bad. Beverly Marsh, I talked about her a little bit. Her dad is not the nicest. He's very creepy to her, about her. And again, she ends up marrying Tom Rogan as an adult, and just kind of that same thing. But Ben Hanscom writes her a poem about her hair. She has really bright red hair. Ember fire, my heart goes there too. Sorry if I misquoted, but she thinks Bill wrote it. So in the adaptations, you really see the connection between Beverly, Bill, and Ben. But in the book, they actually build connections on Richie and Beverly, and I believe Stanley and Beverly, maybe even Eddie and Beverly. You just get a connection with all of them eventually, and they are all best friends. Because in the films, I'm like, I don't even see them being close, but they're all best friends. And another main objective, another scary part of this, is Henry Bowers. I've talked about him a little bit. He gets talked to by the entity in the shape of the moon, and he ends up taking the life of his own father, because just like in the films, the film and the book adaptation there is mirror image perfect to each other, with the switchblade, and he clicks it open. I like how in the adaptation, the newscaster and audience there are basically egging Henry on, like, take his life. That was really creepy. And then he grows up and tries to do its bidding by ending the lives of the Losers Club. However, Eddie ends up being able to block the attack and attack him back. So that's the end of Henry Bowers. But there's a really great quote, and I wish I could. I probably can't quote it because I can't find it. I have to do this in one take because editing has just been a nightmare, to be honest. But there's a quote about friendship, and I'll link it down below where you can read that quote, or I'll pin a comment, because it's a really good quote about friendship. And that part really is what got me in the feels of this, is that when they defeat it for a second time, they all start forgetting. Even Mike, who's staying in Derry, Maine, they all forget each other. And that's kind of the thing, is I've kind of been prone to not being able to keep friends, and people tend to forget me, and I tend to forget people too. And it's just like, imagine there's people who make an impact on you and you make an impact on them, sometimes just for that time being, sometimes just for that summer. And I don't know, it just makes me very emotional. And Ben says a quote about friendship. I should have, no, it's on there. I don't have it, I'm sorry. I will pin it down below. But those are the main things that I really enjoyed about it. And I definitely recommend you guys read it for yourselves. Take your time with it. The only reason I feel like I slow paced it is because there's a booktuber who read this in 6 days. 200 pages a day in 6 days. There's no way. Not with substituting a group of kids for a whole day, a class for a whole day. Oh gosh, 6 classes. It wasn't just one, it was 6 classes. Oh my world. And then a baby, 3 dogs. It was a lot. Oh yeah, and then I have another job as well on the side. So it's like, then I have an antique booth. Like, I ain't reading this in 6 days, let me tell you what. I'm glad that person has the time of day to do that. Not me. But I read it in 3 months. That's still really good, especially with all that stuff I have going on. But please pick it up. I will also be linking a link to, they are coming out with the collector's edition. It's not a paid promotion. There's no discount or anything. I haven't gotten there yet, but I want you guys to have access to that collector's edition. So I am going to pin that down below, probably in the descriptions, but just definitely read this, you guys. It was so good. My favorite thing is that even though I know what these characters look like because of the adaptations, you can imagine them however you want. That's why I'm so obsessed now with reading, because I want to go down and I'm seeing all these movies that I loved and I've reviewed, and I'm like, that was based on a book. That one was based on a book. I want to read the book. I want to see the details of what these characters are feeling and thinking and saying, and what are we missing from the films, because a film only takes an hour. A book takes days. It's such a beautiful situation. I love it so much. I wonder if I can... Sorry, I'm such a nerd. That's funny. Okay, anyway, I'm gonna leave you guys. I just wanted to do this in one shot because, again, editing has just been crazy. But please read this book. It's so good. I'm gonna go down and read Stephen King the rest of the year. Right now, I have started The Long Walk. I will do more of a vlog style with how I read that book, but also I am joining BookTube. So if you have any questions about what kind of books I read, or what books I look forward to reading, what got me into reading, and what I expect to make this channel go more towards, go ahead and ask. Oh, and do you guys still want me to do film reviews? Because I still need to film 28 Years Later and Squid Game Season 3, because I did Squid Game Season 2, so I need to follow up with Squid Game Season 3 as well. I thought it was a great ending, to be honest. I hate that it got spoiled for me, but it was a good ending. Could you imagine Squid Game in a book form? That'd be so cool. Anyway, I will leave you guys for now, but I will join you all on the long walk. All right, have a good time, and please comment, like, comment, subscribe, and let me know what books you guys like. Is there any Stephen King books you would recommend? I do have The Long Walk, reading that now. The Dark Tower Part 1, because that starts the whole multiverse. And then I have Needful Things and The Shining. I have read The Shining and Dr. Sleep in the past, but I don't remember The Shining all too much, except for the film, Stanley Kubrick. But I don't remember the book all too much. I'm an idiot. I sold Dr. Sleep, and My favorite book of all time, I'm just gonna say it now, Horns by Joe Hill. And I have a joke with this because Joe Hill is Stephen King's son. So why does he go by Joe Hill, not let the last name King? Because he didn't want to go by Joe King. Okay, with that, I'm getting off. I'm stupid, but let me know what books you guys like, what you love about books, and I will see you guys next time. Thanks so much for joining me, and I'm so excited to be joining BookTube. I think it's a very sweet community, and I look forward to seeing you guys and reading with you guys some more.